So we're back here with our slipcover for our chair, our armless chair. The body of the slipcover has already been sewn, and we're working on our skirt. When we last left you, I was marking the skirt. We put pins where we wanted the skirt to be, and we marked it off at 14 inches. I've trimmed down exactly 14 and a half inches, or 13 and a half inches from the floor, because I need my half-inch seam allowance. I want the skirt to start right here, 1/2 inch up. So now I have to determine how big the skirt should be. I need to measure this. Okay, typically I would have a soft tape measure, but this will work. The front of my chair is 19 inches. So I'm going to make a little picture of my chair seat, how big this skirt should be. Front to back comes in at 19. And across the back it's 17. So this would be 19. So I need my skirt to go all around these pieces. I'm also going to put a pleat in each of the corners. And I want each of these pleats to be 16 inches is a good amount to be in a pleat, because the pleat will, the skirt will come by, it goes in, it goes out, goes back here, and then continue with the skirt. So we need 4 widths that is going into the skirt. So if I put 16 inches in there, my pleat will be 4 inches and 4 inches. So 16 inches is a nice size pleat. You can get away with 12 inches. Some people go for 18 or 20. But 16 is good, and it's not a really big chair. So I have to add all of these things up. Let's do the math. 3 times 19 is 27, carry 2, 57, and 17. So 4. So it's 74 inches circumference for my chair. So that's 74 inches. And I need 4 pleats at 16. So it's 16 times 4. And I know that that's going to be, 32 and 32. So it's going to be 64. So 64. So 8. So 138 is what I need my skirt to be to get all the way around and to put in my 4 pleats. So I gotta keep this number is important as I figure out what's going to happen. So we had fabric left over. I decided how to cut it, and I did this back at the workroom because it's kind of boring to watch. But so I have 138 inches in a big circle. I wanted to have my skirt lined, which is important. A lining gives a lot of body to a skirt, and it will make it look really nice at the floor level. If you just fold over a hem, once, twice, it will always ripple. It'll always be not a nice look. if you don't have the fabric, you don't want to go through the trouble of lining it, it's okay. It's just another look. But I think a more professional look is to have the skirt being lined. And I always bring the face fabric around to the back side before I attach my lining. And anywhere between 1 to 2 to even 3 inches is a good amount to bring around to the back. So I made this huge loop that's lined. I know that my pin mark from the where I want my skirt to begin, where I had the pin to the floor, was exactly 14 inches. So how long should I make my skirt? If I want the skirt to touch the floor, I will make this 14.5. But I want it to be slightly off the floor. So what I did is I made this 14.25, which means, all things being equal, this is going to sit 1/4 inch off the floor. And it will only be approximate, because what will happen, as someone sits on this chair, it's going to compress the foam and padding, and as you're sitting on it, the skirt's going to drag. As they get up off it, it's going to go back to that 1/4 inch. If I had started off with it on the floor, it's going to be dragging on the floor a lot more. So having it aimed for 1/4 inch off the floor or 1/2 inch off the floor, it's all good. So now this is ready to be attached to my slipcover. And what's the best way to do it? I find, can erase these. Of my 138 inches, if I make a center mark here and a center mark here, it's going to be half of this distance, half of distance, and this distance. It will be exactly that distance. So I can divide my 138 exactly in half, and I can put notches on it. So putting a notch here, folded it right in half, and I'll have another notch. And it also works out, because this is very close in dimension. This was 19 and this is 17. If I just center the other part on here, that will work out well too. And that will give me it will even out all of these pleats for me. So here's my first notch that I did, and the other one. I can bring these 2 notches together, and now I know that I can put my 4th notch, 3rd notch, and then 4th. Now I've divided my skirt exactly in 4ths, and I know that from the center point to this center point, I will use up exactly 1/4 of my 138 inches. I don't have to keep measuring this, which is a lovely thing. I don't want to be sitting sewing and having to keep taking out a tape measure. My notches are going to control that. So I've notched my skirt in these 4 points. Now I need to notch my slipcover. So take it off. It's back to the sewing machine. This is the good news and the bad news. Good news is that it's a tight-fitting slipcover. Bad news is it's hard to get on and off. But the end result is good. So here's my outer back. I want to notch my center. I want to notch the middle of the side, but I don't really know where my corner is. So I have to find my corner. What's a good way to find the corner? I want it to be directly below the corner of the top. So where my corner was, I can fold that back on itself, pull this across, keeping the grain of the fabric tight, and make a notch. Now I know that's where my corner is going to be, that's where my pleat is going to be. This is my back corner, this is my front corner. I can fold that in half. By doing these dimensions, by actually calculating things, by just folding things in half and making a notch, is so much easier than getting out a tape measure and continually measuring and trying to do the math about dividing something in half or in thirds or quarters. Here's my corner. I'm folding it back on itself so these edges are lined up. Going with the grain. Now I've notched that corner. Now the only place, oh no, I have to notch my center front. Put these notches together. There's my center front. And my last side, this is the corner to the outer back edge. Fold it in half. Another notch. All right, so I have notched my slipcover, middle of the front, middle of the side, middle of the back, and the other side. I've notched my skirt in the same points. So as I'm sitting at the sewing machine, I just need to match those up, and that will automatically get me my pleats, which I had planned to be 16 inches. So off to the sewing machine. We have to put a welt cord. Be a welt coming here and then the skirt. So I still have leftover welts from when I was working on these pieces. We'll throw the welt on the bottom and then put the skirt on. And then this little baby's done. All right, putting the welt on the bottom. Side 3. All right, we're back to here where we're going to join these pieces. So in home decoration we always sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So my welt cord is coming here. I'm going to overlap it 1 inch and cut. You can see what 1 inch looks like. Cut stitch these together. This is a technique that, as we do other videos, you'll see more and more, because sewing welts cord together. So I want these two pieces to go together. I'm opening up the seams, I'm pressing them together like this, getting my cord out of the way, and stitching it. So now my two pieces are stitched together. I press them open, my thumbnail. I'm going to lay the cord back in here. So now my cord is overlapping. I want to cut it, I could just cut it like this, where they'll butt together. But if anything stretches or pulls, when they may separate and then I'll have a gap. So I always cut my cord itself at an angle like this. Lay it in, and I'm going to cut this cord at an angle. So they're not butting together, but they're overlapping, but I cut away some of it. So if this separates, it will still have cord in there. So it's a better way to do it. Whoops. All stitched down now. So, looks pretty good. No, it doesn't, because I missed. It pulled away. This will be in the bloopers reel. I wasn't watching my seam allowance under there as I put these back together to make sure that everything is lined up well. Nice. Okay, so I'm just replicating that notch there. I'm going to get my skirt. All right. Here's the piece I'm going to use as my center back, and there's my notch. This is the center back notch. Lay that on the table. Find my center back again. Okay. I am using a black bobbin because the white one ran out, so it'll be okay. So I have to keep these centered, and I'm going to start the seam back here at the corner. Make sure my seam allowance is matched up. Remember, we only have a 1/4 inch tolerance on our skirt, so we have to make sure that our stitching line is the 1/2 inch here. Can't be too sloppy about it, and this has to be the 1/2 inch. So. stitching a little shy of my corner, because I can adjust that later. Alright, so the outer back is connected to the skirt. Now I'm coming to the side. All this excess here is going into my pleat. I'm going to get it out of the way. Look for my next notch. It's right here. I know that it's going to belong here. The notch here of this notch. This. And as long as it's in the close range, it's okay. You don't have to be super precise about this. If one of these pleats is a ½ inch or an inch bigger than the other pleats, it's never going to show. As long as they're approximately the same, they will be fine. Let's see, I'm matching up my notches. Coming to my corner, where I also notched. This is where the corner notch is. That's where my pleat's going to be, so I have to stop and add a pleat. It's right here. It's kind of hard to see. Breaking this. Alright, I'm going to add put another pleat in there. This is starting to get heavy. Alright, this is my center front pleat. And I'll find the center front. Okay, here's the notch. Here's my center notch. Line those up, get them ready to go. Go back here. Here's the little notch where my front corner is, so I had stopped stitching there.
What's up?
When you're doing the final stitching, you can see where the black thread is, belt cord. But my final stitching is going to be inside that. I'm pushing the cord, getting closer to that cord. So that black thread isn't going to show anywhere. Right, coming up to coming up to my next corner. Right, stopping. Right. Put some pleat in there. Here's my notch for the center of this side. These get matched up. What happened? My notch has shifted off, and if I wanted to, if it was badly off, I would take this apart and reposition it. But it just means that there'll be a little extra in the front pleat and a little less in the back pleat, and I don't care. It will never show. And if I were making this for a client, I would probably take it apart. It's going in my house, so it'll be fine. Alrighty. Alright, so now the skirt is attached. And I still have these big floppy pieces of fabric that are our pleats. So we need to address these. What's a good way to do it? So at this point I was sewing with the body of the slipcover on top and the skirt on the bottom. Now I'm going to flip it because I want to be able to manipulate these pleats. I'm going to mark where the corner is. This is where my corner seam is. You can see that it's lining up here. And so my skirt is going to come right to the corner. And I just fold it back on itself. I'm going to notch this. So now I know that my pleat is going to lie in like this, somewhat like this. And I need this notch to be matched up with the notch. But I want these two pieces to meet exactly. Because this was a little hard to do when I was sewing before, but starting and stopping. But I could just fold it into place, lay this pleat right on top of it, line up all these seam allowances, all nice, and stitch it down. There's a lot of layers here. I've got the body of the slipcover, two layers for welts. It's 1, 2, 3. 2 layers for the skirt. Another 4 layers for the skirt. So that's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 layers of fabric that I'm trying to get under the presser foot. So always keep adjusting to make sure everything is lined up. Okay, now I've got a nice pleat here. I can check it on this side, see how it looks. My pleat's going to be here. You can see that the center is lining up with the seam. It doesn't line up with the welt cord, it lines up with where the actual seam is. 1 down, 3 more to go. So I move over to the next corner. This is one of the front corners. I've got a notch. Bring these 2 pieces together, slide that out. So I have to make sure that these 2 pieces are meeting, and my notch for the middle of my pleat lines up with that. Pleats are done. Go to the next one. I can see my little notch here. I'm going to it over there so I can be able to see it from this side. While I'm sewing, if I have to manipulate this, and it is pretty heavy, while I'm pulling and tugging, I usually just tuck some of this under the presser foot. And that acts as a little bit of a vise, and it holds it and keeps it from sliding, and I can pull from it. I can just, it's a handy thing to have in your little toolbox. It's there waiting for us, so we should use it. Here's my notch, but you can see how I can pull against it and manipulate things. Holding these together, notch for the middle of my pleat. This piece goes here, this piece goes here. First couple of times you make a slipcover like this, you might want to use pins to hold things in place while you're doing this. But over time, you'll find the pins are more an annoyance. They get in the way, and you risk stitching over them, breaking your needle, or worse, causing burrs on your throat, the throat plate, and causing more trouble on your sewing machine. So at some point you'll feel like you've mastered this whole sewing thing, and you'll just be using your hands to hold things. And your pin cushion will sit by the wayside. Oh, look at this. This was sitting there. I could trim that off. All right, our last pleat. This is back in the corner. So I'm going to hold these up, hold that down, goes to here, halfway. Even though you've got all of this sort of chaos happening, the part that you're working on, you need to have it nice and flat, so that you know where everything is and are just sewing the parts that you need to sew. I know we've all been there, and you've finished sewing something and now you've inadvertently sewed another part to it. So you've got to undo your seams. Right, this looks really nice. Right, this is the very end. It's getting exciting. Oh no. It became unthreaded because it didn't stitch. So, stuff like this always happens on the very last bit. You either run out of bobbin, or in this case I was stitching without thread in the needle. Beautiful. Done. All right. So now you can see pleats have come in nicely. We're going to put it on the chair and we will be done. Moment of truth. So, we've done all our sewing, our skirt is attached, and here's the moment of truth. This has not been rehearsed. So. Okay, this looks nice. Bring this down. This fit well before, so I'm assuming it's going to fit well now. We want this to tuck in. This is our tuck that we've very carefully done. So, two tricks when you're trying to put a slipcover on and you want that tuck to stay in nicely. One, use your knee and push in. And the other thing that's really handy is to get a wooden spoon. Sometimes if your fingernails are too long or you have jewelry on, you don't want to catch it, so use a wooden spoon and just tuck it in. There we are. We are done. What would I change? The pleats are looking good. They do have to flare. The reason for the pleat is as you sit down, you need to be able to put your feet under your chair. When you stand up, you have to put your feet in. So you need the pleat, otherwise it would rip. I could press those down to make it tighter, or I kind of like the way it looks. I'm happy. I had planned the skirt to be 1/4 inch off the floor. It looks like it's on the floor. Would I take it apart? Probably not. Not for that little bit. But if it was for a client, I might. In my house, I might put a little the little Velcro sliders on the feet of the chair. That protects the floor, but it also raises it up about 1/4 inch. All right, so we're done. This is a nice beginner slipcover. It's a chair that has no arms, but you've learned a lot of nice techniques. How to work with cording, how to line a skirt, the welted seams, tuck-ins for ease, the basics of pin fitting. This armless chair, we know that these are nice side chairs that you might have in a room, but we also see these as slipper chairs, a lot of times in bedrooms. It could be much bigger. You know, even a love seat size without arms, you might see that. It's also very adaptable for dining chairs. Even though this is a fully upholstered chair, the seat is upholstered and the back is upholstered, but you could also make this kind of slipcover for a wooden back chair. Techniques are very similar. You just don't have to deal with the upholstery. So you're just shaping fabric around the wooden part of the back and possibly the wooden part of the seat. If you have a dining chair that is uncomfortable, there's not enough padding, you can make a slipcover for it and add extra padding underneath and not have to reupholster it. So underneath this slipcover, I could have slipped in a 2-inch piece of foam and altered the look of this piece. So you have a lot of possibilities for it. I even made slipcovers out of Sunbrella fabric for 2 outdoor chairs that I have in my backyard that are metal, and we've repainted them like 3 times, and the paint just doesn't want to stay. So this last summer I thought, wait, I know how to make slipcovers. So I made slipcovers for them out of Sunbrella, and they stay out all summer, and they've worked out great. And I don't have to look at the ugly chipping paint. So there's lots of possibilities. You would use the same techniques to do an ottoman, a stool, a piano bench. So we've got a lot of places to go with this. And then when we move on to chairs with arms or wings or much more complicated things, you'll have these basic techniques in your tool bag. So all ready to go. Great. Thanks.